We're now joined by Dr. Siri from The Therapist. How are you today?
Just fine, thank you.
Great to see you. Very excited about the show. Please give us a little bit of background. You know, where you grew up and how you got interested in doing what you do.
Well, I was born in Waco, Texas, and we moved out in California in high school. I was in high school. And I went to Manual Arts High School. I became the student body president. And then I went to Carleton College in Minnesota for 4 years. Then I had a theatrical career and I went dancing around the world. And I lived in Europe for 4 years. And then I eventually settled back in California and didn't want to be in the theater anymore. And realized, I actually forgot that I had a VA in psychology. Forgot. And I went back to school and got my master's and got licensed and eventually got my doctorate.
Now, obviously, being around all these creative artists during your theater days, you got to see some of the challenges and some of the processes that these creative people went through. And how has that enabled you to help these people through the therapy and the work that you do?
It's very interesting because I read an article once and he talked about how the therapist is a shadow artist. And it was so interesting. I had a supervisor one time and he says that I have seen that artists make the best therapists. And I said, why? And he said, because you have to be creative in that arena. So I think it's two artists there. So they're creative artists and there's still a creativity that has to flow through me in order to connect with them. So the whole space is creative. Yet, when I was in the theater, I did see some artists have challenging moments and how challenging just being in the theater and the dance world and the music world could be. And so it's really sort of a synthesis of my life world, the creativity with the arts and my love of people and having been in that arena, seeing what artists go through.
Sure. And give us a little background on the evolution of the show, how you developed the concept for it and how you found a home and a life for your show.
Well, actually they approached me and they had the concept and it started out with a pilot with YG and they called me in and I did the pilot with YG and then they called me back up and they said they thought that I did such a good job that they wanted to fly me to New York and have me do therapy, not with a celebrity, but with someone else. And so I did, and they called me up after that and said that I had wowed all of the executives and that they wanted to do a series around me.
And were there any stipulations or any ideas of how you wanted to do it, or did they come to you with a concept that was pretty much laid out?
Well, I was comfortable with the format because I asked them, I said, why did you hire me? I said, is this a theatrical moment? They said, no, we wanted a real therapist. And if we wanted an actor, we would have hired one. So they want a real therapist, and that's why the show is called The Therapist. It's not any fake stuff going on there. It's the real deal. I have to build a therapeutic alliance with the artists, and I've been told that seemingly I make that look easy. That's not so guaranteed that I would build a therapeutic alliance with the client. I mean, that's therapist's nightmare that clients come in and there's no connect.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had, I think, 16 episodes shot so far. And with every client, every musician, we've had a wonderful therapeutic alliance and a connection. So that is most important. Yeah.
Well, especially with the musical artists, some of the unique things that they go through, what do you feel about your background or your work is best aligned with dealing with that kind of genre?
Well, I don't think it's any different from working with any other individual, because therapy is a process of discovery. So it's a collaborative process. I'm learning from them. I'm actively listening, so I'm hearing themes that are developing. It's, regardless of the ethnicity, the sexual orientation, it doesn't matter. It's always a place of discovery. We have to connect with that client and see what they're going to present. So I don't have any agenda when I sit there. I'm just going to see what's going to unfold.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly been involved with music for decades. There seems to be a lot of changes that go on now with both the industry, with the advent of technology, and so many changes with the way we consume and stream entertainment, and both some of the challenges out there with, it seems like a shorter attention span, with the younger generation, and almost a sense of entitlement. Growing up without computers, we had to make do with personal relationships and phone calls, and it seems that a lot of the younger generation is dealing with each other through texts on their phone and through social media, and seems to have less social interaction with actually the person. How do you deal with that, and how do you advise some of these artists?
Well, I think that's an asset, being a therapist, that I do like people, and I do have that history of connecting with people. And so that is what I think is integral to the relationship there. And regardless of how the industry is right now, I think if I can connect to them, then they can connect to themselves. See, the power and the wisdom is inside of them. So if I can get connected to them, then they can connect to themselves, and they know how to work in this industry, and what to do, and who to call, and when to not pick up the call, and when to text, and when to... So it's all about connection. I think you're very correct. It's about connection.
Yes, it's so much of the industry is built on those personal relationships. It seems with the advent of the computer age, and those growing up with a computer at a very, very early age, again, they're almost reliant on finding information at a click of a mouse, where we had to do a lot of discovery and research and pull out the encyclopedias and call some people and that. And it seems that a lot of the younger generation seems almost overly confident that they can achieve more than possible with a click of a mouse. Seems to be a little deterioration in the attitude to pay one's dues and really nurture their mastering of whatever art forms that they're interested in. How do you see that as a change, in our society, and how can one, better maybe adapt to that?
Well, it's so interesting, because I think we have to adapt to it too, and so I realized at one point there, because I had to teach myself these computer things, it's like if I didn't get on this computer, I was going to be left behind.
Yeah.
And so I think it goes both ways. I think there still is a little disconnect because they have trouble really understanding when we call them. I hear parents all the time about they call their children, they don't pick up the phone, but if they text, they'll respond. And so I think it's a little of both there, though I do think there is some entitlement there in the with the millenniums. So society's moving, and I don't want to pathologize it, but it does have some consequences with the emphasis on technology. But I'm as concerned as keeping up with it as I would like for them to connect to us.
Sure. Yeah. Seems like a lot of people from our eras, you know, they put in their 10,000 hours plus. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of remarkable to see a lot of, younger people not expect to put in that, to kind of get to the goal line before they ran the race, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And I know that's, hard to deal with. Amongst some of these younger artists that you've talked to and been on the show, I know, again, with social media and the internet, there seems to be almost a perception where you can become somewhat of an overnight star, meaning, people hadn't really heard of you, and then you're the buzz on the internet, and in your mind you've made it, when in fact you can almost go away as quickly as you came.
True.
Can be a has-been, the next day. How do you deal with that to almost prepare some of these artists that they're hot now and maybe tomorrow they might not be as hot, but life goes on?
Well, I haven't had any present that as an issue yet. It's so interesting. I've only seen a couple of artists that were older than 30. Mm-hmm. And one had already found a new career. And the other was sort of really soaring still. He was like classic. And I don't think there are any absolutes like that, the overnight success or the long term. I think it depends upon some special energy you have or some insight you have as to how to keep it going, or if it's really over, The gentleman that was no longer in the music industry was completely fine. Mm-hmm. And the other artist he said that he tours over 200 days out of the year, and he's in his 40s, and was a legend with the rap. So I think it differs. And I think there are the overnight successes. I hear some of the artists spent 30 minutes making a record, and it just went mega. And yet it's so interesting. I hear another thing, that the ones where they spend all of this time going, oh, this is going to be the Grammy, and this is going to be the hit. I had one artist tell me he did that and he got 10 record plays, 10 radio plays.
Yeah. And
he spent all this money and time on it. The one he spent 30 minutes on that he said he actually hated was the one that went mega. So this concept of overnight and time, I don't think there are any absolutes around it, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, quite often a lot of songwriters have said the songs that became the most popular, the ones that came pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And the ones, like you say, that they laboriously, fine-tuned and redid and worked, and, there wasn't a spontaneity there, and you can over-perfect something, and being that a lot of people, they like the simplicity of the message or the feeling, the spontaneity is great. Now, I know that one of your subjects, Corey Taylor, yes, actually wears a mask.
Yes.
In his main live performances. And can you give us any insight on, you know, does he feel like he's a different person when he puts that mask on? Can he do things with the mask on that he can't do in his normal life? What is the difference, you know, when you mask yourself?
Well, as a therapist, I'm always trying to see what's underneath the behavior, and I think that that is the theoretical orientation I work. So I have a hypothesis. I think it's on the series that there was some masking in his life. So this was a way that he was healing himself unconsciously, or he was personifying something within his psyche. And when we did the work, we found out that it was really true, that there were some childhood secrets that he never told, that, you know, it was a way of symbolic of masking. And so I go into what is the behavior actually, what is underneath it. And so I was able to really connect with, Mr. Taylor when I had that approach to him. And then consequently we got into some deep revelations of what he was masking.
And obviously the age-old adage or decadence, promiscuity around music, where the drugs, the alcohol abuse, the almost fast sexual partners that don't mean anything. Where's the help that you provide in dealing with that? Because we talk about relationships, we talk about the longer term relationships that mean something, but the quick high, or the quick buzz, or the quick pleasure, what are some of the dangers in that? Once you try and move out of that life into a normalcy.
Well, I don't know if all artists are like that, but I know a number are in the music industry. And again, I look for what's underneath the behavior. Like, often there's sexual abuse. There may be some need to really connect. Before, say, coming to stardom, you could have been no one gave you any attention, and now that you have all this attention, that may be another way of heightening your self-esteem. So it may come from different places. It may come from really an addictive personality, to where this is filling up an emptiness inside. So again, I'm looking for what's underneath the behavior, and it would only come out if the artist himself resents it, or I intuit that this is there and it's a problem. If otherwise it probably would not surface. It's like with all the drugs, of course. That's another issue which I find is really sort of prevalent in the music industry, and well, that could be real issue, especially gets into hard drugs, and the marijuana and the alcohol. Well, they're legal, so it's like, again, if they're doing it to excess and can't stop and want to stop, then we would look at it as a therapeutic concern.
Sure. It seemed to be an ongoing issue with a lot of people, that once they felt that adulation from the crowd, they hear the roar of the audience, and then they go back to the dressing room and it's like dead silence. They go to into a car, into a motel room, they crave that rush of that crowd, and a lot of them traditionally have seemed to medicate themselves to kind of blur that normalcy that when they're not on stage. And obviously that's what's become an addiction in most cases, if you're dealing with a narcotic, something that you use that to get up or come down, and it becomes a 24/7 issue in your life. You can't quite operate without it. So obviously there's rehab centers and people that you could probably advise them to, but is there any advice you give to a younger person that might be dabbling to kind of find that inner strength without that?
Well, what I have seen is that if a person doesn't take themselves along with their success, then you could be headed for some detrimental aspects coming up in your life, like drug addiction or sexual addiction or boredom or depression. So if you don't really work on yourself and have a real awareness of your needs and your passions and your ideas and your triggers and your feelings, then you're at risk for all of those negative behaviors and patterns that are out there. So the advice I would give is, advice is not what therapists really are about. It's really about creating the space and letting the wisdom come through you. Mm-hmm. But I think there's an awareness that should be out there that, you know, you have to work on yourself. So when you get there, you're right there at home, whole, fulfilled, where you don't need the adulation, you don't need the praise, you're just fine.
Now, I know you've got a number of episodes in the can and many more coming up. Are there some people that you, on your wish list, that you would love to talk to?
Well, I'm not going to tell you my wish list. They may be listening and then they go, oh.
Yeah.
But I do have a few. I would like to see. Actually, they told me they were considering a particular artist, and I had seen this artist on television, and I was so enamored of this artist. I had never seen this artist give an interview, and I was just like, oh, I would just love to sit in her presence, you know. And they actually told me they contacted her, but she's so busy. But then the director the other day gave me a button with her picture on it. I said, is this as close as I'm getting to her? So yes, there are some I would love to work with, yeah.
Sure. And in one's everyday life, why should they see a therapist, and why should, you know, this be a part of their, you know, everyday life to get the most out of their life?
Well, you know, therapists get a bad rap in this culture, and I myself have had 5 therapists. And I never forget my mother, when she was living, one day she called me up. She says, well, what are you doing? I says, Mom, I'm going to go to therapy. Therapy? You don't need no therapy. What do you need therapy for? I says, Mom, you know, Dad was a functional alcoholic. Don't you talk about your father. And this was my family's reality. But yet I worked on myself and got in touch with, I investigated, I dug, and I became aware, self-aware. And I think in dealing with all of that stuff that you keep in the dark and is secretive to you, it messes up your life. It overtakes you at some point. So it's about creating a space so you can really become self-aware. And it's so interesting. Each one of the artists that I've worked with, at the end of the session, they invariably say, oh, you helped me become aware of who I am. And that's very flattering, and I think the goal of therapy, so that you can just deepen into the self.
Well, it's been a pleasure spending time with you. We can't wait to see more episodes of The Therapist. Dr. Siri, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.